Hello, everybody. This is Matthew Brand. Welcome to the Amethyst Podcast. Today, I am concluding the Tarot and Avatar series where I connect characters from the show to the tarot cards, the major arcana, and that is for the purposes of world building, also understanding the characters in the show a bit more, and perhaps maybe even some life lessons. So, moving forward, I am going to be doing a death card and connecting that to Fire Lord Ozai. But before I do that, I want to talk about a card I'm skipping over. And the reason I'm skipping over this is because it doesn't really pertain to a particular character. It's more like I would say, the uh, adversaries or the main antagonists of each season, which is the Hangman. The Hangman is the literal depiction of F around and find out, right? It's a person who is stuck in a pattern and they're using this pattern as worked for them so far to get where they need, but they're not taking time to reassess that after they get to a certain point, it's not working out for them, right? So different from Zuko, who just keeps trying every single different angle to capture the avatar, and he's stuck in this mindset. You have General, and I'm trying to remember all these characters correctly. General Zhao, who is using brute force and manipulation to get his way, and eventually gets to a point where it's like, hey, don't do that, but he does it anyway, and he kills the moon spirit and basically screws the world over until things are set back in motion. The next character is the head of the I hope I'm saying this right, Dai Li, right? The secret Earth agents, right? He betrays, and a lot of this has like betrayal. So this card sometimes is tied to Judas Iscariot, and so a traitor like character, right? Like Brutus or something along those lines. And what you have is what's often seen as the worst of the worst when it comes to certain characters. That's why if you look at the ninth or the final circle of hell, um, or is it seven? Either way, the last circle of hell is reserved for betrayers and mutineers. So that being said, that's where the hangman comes in. They, going through this process, they're stuck in this mindset, and they find out, but they kind of find out the hard way, so to speak. So, f around and find out in card incarnate. But I don't want to really stick on these characters because they're not really dwelled on in the show. I want to talk about the death card, which is tied to Fire Lord Ozai. And it doesn't always mean death, destruction, evil. It just represents a change and a force change. And Ozai is the reason for most of the force change in the show. It's a skeleton, Grim Reaper like character, usually riding a horse. I typically go on a rider weight deck, but it's other character or other cards have similar depictions. Usually has a scythe, and one of the most important things is there's like a king's head on the ground, right? Firelord Orzai kills his father, or has his father offed, so that he can become king. He steps in the card. Death is stepping over the king, showing that even royalty or nobility cannot fight this, right? It's comes for everybody, right? Nobody is immune to death, right? So, but also when it comes to change, nobody is immune to change. And Ozai being the center of change for most of the show, he's the reason Aang is forced to flee and go on his hero's journey. He's a source of Zuko's pain and torment that forces him to chase the Avatar and go on his journey. He's a catalyst for Azula leaving and becoming the maniacal um, psychopath that she is completely unsocialized. He is the reason for most people's motivations in the show. He's a If he's not the one who ordered certain people's deaths, he's the one who is the catalyst for much of it. So that is really death, and of course he brings death and destruction everywhere he goes, and so does Ozai, right? Uh, so does the Grim Reaper. That's just what the character is, and he doesn't really show up much in the show. If you notice, he's kind of in the background. He's a looming force, a looming presence, same as death, right? And again, it doesn't necessarily mean directly death. A lot of times, it just means a change coming, an end of an era, end of peace for most of the characters in the show. But in life, it can be just the end of whatever journey that you've gone through, whatever journey that you're moving through. He also has a lot to do with the devil character, or the devil arcana card, where is kind of representative of a attachment, unhealthy attachment to something. And Azula and Zuko are both chained to this, devil like character. They're both chained to their father in these expectations that he has of them. And they're kind of obsessed with, pleasing and, making him happy and hoping to be rewarded in a certain way. But in all reality, he doesn't care about them at all. Even Azula, who is his, prodigy, he makes it seem as though he's leaving her behind to be a Fire Lord, but it's really just so he can have the moment to himself. And this eventually drives her crazy and falls back on her being the third season hangman card, right? Her attitude, her forced need to be in control of everything, her trying to manipulate every situation through intimidation, eventually falters, and she doesn't know what to do anymore. She f's around and she finds out. So those are all, three antagonists. She's more of the main antagonist for a lot of the seasons than the Fire Lord is. He's a looming presence in the background, like death or the devil. So he ties to those two cards very well, and a lot of times those cards can be combined when it comes to an antagonist or a larger antagonist in a show. If you look at some character like, I'd say, I don't want to say um, Disney villains, but there's a lot of Disney villains that kind of have this, they're the catalyst. Scar is a really good example, right? He gets rid of the king, steps over the king. He's the catalyst for a lot of change in the show. He he's a looming presence. He's the end of an era, right? He's the end of Mufasa's era and moves in this new wave going on. But he's not quite a devil character, and he's not got a lot chained to him. But he does have um the I don't want to say audacity, but uh the what would you say, the assumption that he's the most intelligent being in the show. Like he thinks he's smarter than Mufasa, and it turns out that he doesn't know how to run things anywhere near as well as his brother did. And even still, he creates this wave of death. Right? If you look at the Pride Lands after he takes over, everything's dead. There's a mass exodus of all the beasts that they would normally be able to eat. The circle of life has been disrupted. But that doesn't mean that he represents death in himself. He doesn't go around killing everybody. He's not a physical threat to everything around him. He's a presence, in the background. You always see him standing kind of off in the background, controlling things from behind the scenes. Same as Ozai. Right now, I'm not saying that these characters are extremely similar, but there's a lot of similarities there, right? But notice neither of them are skeletons. Neither of them walk around with a scythe or anything. They're just a background presence. And also, one more thing, I'm pretty sure Ozai is voiced by Mark Hamill, and that doesn't really have anything to do with any of this, but I just thought I would bring that up. Also, Darth Vader kind of fits that character trope as well. Again, he doesn't do a lot of the actions in the show. He's a catalyst for a lot of it, but he's what would you call it? He's a presence. He's a deadly presence that pushes a lot of the changes and motivations and actions in the show that happens throughout the three original Star Wars trilogy, right? And even at the end, he steps over the king, right? You notice that these characters who represent this death motif are often, uh, well, I can't remember, they're regicidal, right? Um, This is a very common writing old character trope. It's not as prominent as the mentor character, in the hermit uh, connections, but it's very strongly present enough there to be noted, if so to speak. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I hope this series was enjoyable. If so, leave a like. If you have any interest, I mean, yeah, it's pretty low budget. I'm just kind of ranting, and that's kind of what I do. The next series is probably going to be focused on cigar reviews. I've been waiting for a long time to do those. Uh, really backed up, to be completely honest. And if you're wondering why cigar reviews, to be honest, I love cigars, but it doesn't really tie into much of what I talk about. Throughout the day, I really do talk about these things with people and discuss it and find it interesting. Sometimes I'm asked to write on them, so I do, and then after writing, I try to use, not let go, make use of all the time I spent, researching and learning these things. And I do also find it fascinating, but sometimes a little change of pace is called into action. A lot of the change for Amatus from Magnum Creed was due to, honestly, similar things with the cigar stuff. It's not something I go on and on and on and on about. Like, not everybody I run into on a daily basis is interested in cigars like I am. Same thing with self defense or firearms or the Second Amendment. Like, not everybody else is interested in that. And that's not why I'm changing because I bother with a niche audience, but it comes to a point where I would say sometimes if you're in the know, right? I think there was a golfing analogy when it came to writing, right? So someone gave a golf analogy. If you're writing about golf in a novel, right? It doesn't help to go into great detail about golf because most people who don't golf don't care to know that much detail about it. And the people who do know a lot about golf either already know what you're saying or they how would I put it? They know more than what you're saying. Like they know more about it than you do. So if you're basketball master, Michael Jordan isn't going to be interested in. I'm sorry, not if you're a basketball master. If you're giving the basic details of basketball, Michael Jordan wouldn't be interested in it if he was reading your book. He already knows better. But people who aren't that into basketball don't really need to know every rule of the game unless it really ties into the plot of the story. And info dumps aren't the best way to help that. Now, with this, with the Tarot and the Avatar series, I it's something I don't really see a lot of people talking about. Sometimes I see people talking about archetypes and character tropes and stuff like that, overly sarcastic productions, though I'm probably on the opposite end of the political spectrum from them when it comes to certain things. They do a great job displaying character tropes. Like when I see another one of their trope episodes come out, I get excited. I love hearing about that. I love listening to Shady Durax talk about the morality of the shows that he watches. I don't want to say that again. I agree politically with everything that he says. I probably would be closer in agreement with him than I would be with maybe something like overly sarcastic productions. But I do love listening to those shows. I find it very his insight very interesting, and the morality of things like Avatar: The Last Airbender or King of the Hill or even the Teen Titans, right? It's it's good to see that contrast in opinion, but again, I don't see very many shows that portray these types of ideas. Another channel I really like is Extra Credits, right? They have Extra Credits Gaming, they have Extra Credits History, Extra Credits Mythology. They have all these different, between the history, mythology, and the gaming, all these little different avenues to check out the stuff they're talking about. And I love hearing their perspectives. But this was something I haven't heard too much when it came to tying the cards to things like that. And I don't really hear a lot of nerd references. So that's something I always wanted to do, was just kind of give like little nerd references to life situations. And I thought by using the tarot cards in a show that is very well loved, and even though loved by nerds, is still very loved by a lot of people, I thought it could really, really um, highlight the themes that I wanted to point out. But moving on to cigars, that will be probably a more niche thing. However, the one thing about cigars are there's so many of them. They're like Pokemon. I know they're Pokemon, but it's like Pokemon, right? You got to catch them all, and everybody can give. There's so much content there when it comes to cigars. There's so many different ones out there that you really, really get a variety. There's enough out there to talk about to give a different perspective. And the way I was going to review cigars is I was going to give it kind of a price, not price rating, but uh, contrasted with price. And I know this is completely off base for the series I was just doing, but the reason I was doing that is because when I hear cigar reviews, you kind of get two types of content. You get shills, and there are people who sell cigars. So obviously, to keep good graces with the people that they're talking about, uh, you don't really get much of the most honest commentary. Like they're either going to tell you they either like a cigar and they're selling the cigar and they're going to tell you what they like about it. But you don't get the cigars that they don't care for. They're not going to bother telling you, like, hey, yeah, this was a horrible cigar, just so you know. Then you get the people who kind of smoke and they give their opinion on a cigar, like Lee Mack. I forget, I think it's like I'm going to say maybe 912 or something like that. But there's a black guy, Lee Mack, who gives his very honest opinions. I'm going to assume they're honest opinions on cigars, whether he thinks they're good or whether he thinks they're bad. But his content is a little bit more long form, and there's not a very solid rating system. He's got a basic number system, right? But not the, not the most basis. And some of these cigar reviews, like even when you get with Half Wheel or Cigar, I think it's going to Cigar Hound Dog, who I just discovered. I didn't know about him too much. Maybe Cigar Obsession too, who had moved to Rumble for the most part. These people really, I don't know how to explain it, but they really don't take price into consideration the same way I do when I'm smoking a cigar. So that's the avenue I'm going to kind of hopefully fit in, is taking more price into consideration. That was a long way to say that. It was very out of place on this episode, but hopefully you can forgive me for that. Thanks for tuning in. God bless you. I hope you enjoyed this series. Leave me a like if you did. Maybe a subscribe would be great. And if you have any opinions, please leave them in the comments. Peace.